नेशनल इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ अर्बन अफेयर्स गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया का थिंक टैंक है। ये 1976 बना है। वी आर सेलिब्रेटिंग अवर 47th एनिवर्सरी नेक्स्ट मंथ। ओवर अ पीरियड ऑफ टाइम ये इवॉल्व हुआ है। आज ये 5 चीज़ें मेनली कर रहा है। ये सबसे पहले अर्बनाइजेशन कैसे इंडिया में बढ़ रही है, क्या हो रहा है, उसका इकोनॉमिक डेवलपमेंट के ऊपर क्या इफेक्ट होता है, उसकी स्टडीज करता है। सेकंड, अगर सिटीज इंजन्स ऑफ इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ है तो वो इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ को सस्टेन करने के लिए अगर प्राइवेट सेक्टर है, क्या हमारी सिटीज उसके लिए तैयार है, तो उसके लिए स्टडीज करता है। थर्ड, सिटीज को डाटा चाहिए, बिकॉज डाटा इज द न्यू ऑयल, दैट्स आजकल सब लोग बोल रहे हैं। First thing we have to do is make the language of climate the language of cities. And we looked at 5 areas where cities there are major responsibilities as constitutional amendment is water, wastewater, mobility, air quality, green buildings, green spaces, public spaces, and energy, renewable energy. So these are the 5 or 6 areas where cities are thinking about it.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Climapreneur Show. In today's episode, we are speaking with Mr. Hitesh Vaidya, the Director of National Institute of Urban Affairs. With him today, we really try to explore that how can we build climate resilient smart cities? What does it really take to build these cities? The work his institute has been doing towards building these cities. I'm sure you're going to gain some really great insights on cities and climate change. So please do follow the conversation, and if you like the conversation, please not forget to hit the subscribe button. Welcome, Mr. Hitesh, on the Climapreneur Show. तो सर सबसे पहले ये बताओ कि नेशनल इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ अर्बन अफेयर्स करता क्या है?
First of all, thank you for having me here. नेशनल इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ अर्बन अफेयर्स गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया का थिंक टैंक है। ये 1976 में बना है। वी आर सेलिब्रेटिंग अवर 47th एनिवर्सरी नेक्स्ट मंथ। It was basically established to build capacities, do a research on urban issues, and advocate about advocacy on reforms. Over a period of time ये इवॉल्व हुआ है। आज ये 5 चीज़ें मेनली कर रहा है। ये सबसे पहले अर्बनाइजेशन कैसे इंडिया में बढ़ रही है, क्या हो रहा है, उसका इकोनॉमिक डेवलपमेंट के ऊपर क्या इफेक्ट होता है, उसकी स्टडीज़ करता है। सेकेंड, अगर सिटीज़ इंजन्स ऑफ इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ है तो वो इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ को सस्टेन करने के लिए अगर प्राइवेट सेक्टर है, क्या हमारी सिटीज़ उसके लिए तैयार है, तो उसके लिए स्टडीज़ करता है। थर्ड, सिटीज़ को डाटा चाहिए, बिकॉज डाटा इज़ द न्यू ऑयल, दैट्स आजकल सब लोग बोल रहे हैं। तो अगर डाटा है तो डाटा आएगा कहाँ से, उसकी डाटा स्ट्रेटजीज़ क्या होंगी, डाटा प्रोटोकॉल्स क्या होंगे, उसके लिए सिटीज़ को प्रिपेयर करता है। फोर्थ, सिटीज़ में और भी कई चीज़ें हैं कैपिटल एक्सपेंडिचर के अलावा, विच वी कॉल इट सॉफ्टवेयर थिंग्स लाइक जेंडर security, disabled people. How do you mainstream them into the overall urban planning process? उसके frameworks क्या हैं, उसके tools क्या हैं, उसके templates क्या होने चाहिए, वो develop करता है। And lastly, which I think all of us will agree, कि end of the day what intention has to be converted to action, तो उसके लिए पैसा चाहिए। तो कहाँ से cities की financial strength आएगी cities में, उनके own source revenues कहाँ से बढ़ेंगे, उनके अल्टरनेटिव सोर्सेज ऑफ फाइनेंसिस कहाँ से आएंगे, उन चीज़ों के बारे में सिटीज़ को प्रिपेयर करता है। बिकॉज इट इज़ अ कैपेसिटी बिल्डिंग इंस्टीट्यूट, इसका और इम्प्लीमेंटेशन नहीं है, इसका मेन मकसद है ये सारे जो इश्यूज़ हैं, जो अर्बन चैलेंजेस हैं, अर्बन इश्यूज़ हैं, इनको डिस्कशन टेबल पे लाया जाए। सो दिस इज़ व्हाट इन नटशेल urban National Institute of Urban Affairs is.
But sir, I'm very surprised. Like I have been to IHC a couple of times, but मतलब आई नेवर रियली केम अक्रॉस कि मतलब ऐसा भी एक इंस्टीट्यूट होगा या ऐसा भी एक थिंक टैंक होगा जो इतना ग्रैनुलर सोच रहा है। मतलब आई एम ऑलवेज सरप्राइज टू फाइंड सच डिस्कवरीज एंड दैट टू एफिलिएटेड और दैट टू बाय गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया। सो इट जस्ट फील्स अमेजिंग टू सी कि हम कितना ज़्यादा रिसर्च इन डेप्थ जाके इन चीज़ों के बारे में सोच रहे हैं। बट सर आज जैसे हम सिटीज़ की बात कर रहे हैं, सबसे बड़ा चैलेंज जो है वो है क्लाइमेट चेंज। हर जगह सस्टेनेबिलिटी, क्लाइमेट रेजिलियंस एंड हाउ कैन सिटीज मीट देयर इंडिविजुअल क्लाइमेट टारगेट्स। So what is happening at say your institute with this respect, and uske baad we'll go into each element that you talked about, data, soft and everything, their integration with climate resilient cities.
Okay, great. This is a challenge which all of us are facing, the climate. Climate is a big challenge. As the National Institute of Urban Affairs, we were talking about climate, but we were doing a very siloed approach. where we were doing couple of workshops, couple of webinars, couple of podcasts, if you call it. But there was not a very systematic thinking approach. So in 2018-19, after the new urban agenda came up, and Government of India also started, had made a lot of commitments because of 2015 Sendai framework came up, a new urban agenda came up, sustainable development goals came up. So India was also preparing for that. As Government of India was preparing for these challenges and how to address it, our institute also started working on it. And in 2019, we consolidated the work we were doing and we started a climate center for cities. And one of the area of the climate center for cities was how do you mainstream climate actions with the day-to-day operations of the cities. And then what we realized is, first thing we have to do is make the language of climate the language of cities. And that's what we thought was, what are the main areas where cities are doing? Because if I go and tell them you have to do climate, they will not understand. What are the major areas they are doing? And we looked at 5 areas where cities are engaging with citizens, or there are major responsibilities as per the constitutional amendment, is water, wastewater, mobility, air quality, green buildings, green spaces, public spaces, and energy, renewable energy. So if these are the 5 or 6 areas where cities are working, have cities started thinking about it? And that is our first exercise, was let's start looking at, have cities started thinking about these issues on the climate end, from the climate lens. They were thinking about it from the climate lens. So we started a first assessment, which was the first time, I think it's a largest assessment done in the world at this moment, 126 cities covering around 30% of the population. So right now we are in a third phase of this assessment. We have been gradually doing it. Now we have moved from 126 cities to 250 cities. But what we did not look at a performance indicators, that you are good, bad, ugly. What we looked at we looked at development indicators. And when we say development indicators, we marked cities from the qualitative point of view. Have you started thinking about it? If these are the issues, have you taken some kind of a policy environment within your thing? If you have made some policy, have you taken some action out of it? If you've done an action, what have you started scaling on this and made it much larger thing? So these were 4 or 5 assessment development indicators, under which we looked at 28 indicators, these 5 broad buckets, and did an assessment. And amazingly, and I must say that while we say that our cities are not doing, the results were other way around. Our cities, without much of a handholding from center or state, have on its own started thinking about it. So even though they may not have taken actions and scaled up, but they were in the level of second grades 2 or 3, in the sense that they had started thinking about it. They have made small task forces or deliberations on this, created some policy framework on it. They needed a lot of handholding. So that is how we started working. But and now preparing cities to really, how do they one was assessment, but second thing is, how do you take from assessment to a level 2? So now each assessment also looked at what are the challenges cities facing and created a roadmap for that. So that is how we are working with the cities on climate, and I can deliberate it with the later questions you had, but I can continue discussing what to do. What
so that's very interesting to me. What I really found interesting was that the way you assess these cities. So like when I was doing like my research during my masters, I realized the same thing, that telling someone good, bad, ugly, is it going to create an impact? No, we're just categorizing them. But the way you did it, you actually went towards an action oriented approach, because even if it's one no, it's telling you कि नहीं ये no है तो इससे हमें ये करना है. If it's a yes, it's moving to you towards another direction. Yeah. So I think that's really an amazing way to assess anything. That's an action oriented assessment, I would say. As you said, that our cities are really doing things. So please मतलब थोड़ी सी केस स्टडीज दो, कुछ बताओ कि इंडियन सिटीज, कोई भी इंडियन सिटी के बारे में, कि वहाँ पर ऐसा हो रहा है या फिर ऐसा था और अब ये सब काम हो रहा है.
So in this assessment, while we were doing assessment, we also did how cities learn from each other. So we created a platform called CDot, which is the Observatory of Climate Cities. So in this CDot, when we did an assessment, this is available on public platform, where everybody can assess it. A city like say Varanasi can look at it, how Varanasi is performing in these indicators from vis-a-vis what Surat is doing or what some city in Shimla is doing, and they can see on how their peers are really performing, and performing not but also what is the national indicator, how far they are from the national average, how far are from the peer city, so that they can make a decision and they get incentivizing them to really learn it. But the question you asked about how other cities, I'll give you two or things. So right now the cities which are on category 4 have taken action are like Surat, Vadodara, and a couple of more. But so what Surat did, and I'll give you an example for it. Surat had a creek which was total land, nobody was doing it. Surat developed a biodiversity park on that same creek, and today what I'll say on Surat is Surat. We say sparrow is gone. We are seeing with the local species now sparrows are back in Surat, that park, and it became a public place for people to come, people to know that the whole creek which was depleted has now started coming up, and we did only one phase right now. They are planned to do it across the full creek over there. So that's one example. स्मॉल सिटी ऑफ हुबली, वहाँ पे एक नाला था, बहुत गंदा नाला था. वो नाला सदियों से था, सड़क सिटी के बीच बीच में था. उन्होंने उसी नाले को इंडिजीनियस कंक्रीट ना बना के वो ग्रेवियल टेक्नोलॉजीज को यूज़ करके दे कवर्ड दैट. नाउ दिस इज फ्रॉम द लो इनकम सेटलमेंट से जाते हुए वो एक साइकिल ट्रैक बन गया. 10 किलोमीटर का वो साइकिल ट्रैक बन रहा है. तो वो हुबली ने किया. तो इस ढंग से हर स्मॉल बड़ी सिटी और छोटी सिटी कोई ना कोई अपना इंडिजीनियस काम कर रही है. द क्वेश्चन विच वी हैव टू रियली वर्क ऑन इट, एंड इंस्टेड ऑफ कीपिंग देम एन आइलैंड ऑफ सक्सेसेस बन के इनको स्केल अप कैसे करें. ये बेस्ट प्रैक्टिसेस को लाइक दिस टाइप ऑफ प्लेटफॉर्म से हम उनको एक्सचेंज करें, एक सिटी दूसरे से सीखे कि अगर वो सूरत ये कर सकता है तो इंदौर इज अनदर एग्जाम्पल है. 7 टाइम से क्लीन सिटी है. आई वॉज रिसेंटली इन इंदौर लास्ट वीक. द प्राइड विच citizens have started feeling, and what it has did, not because of its clean city, they are feeling very happy about it. How cities has used cleanliness as their USP to leverage funding from other things. I think that pride also has things. So now they are talking about climate financing. They are talking about other areas where they can really leverage, and it has become a all the eyes are towards Indore, how it is performing. So that's another great example. A lot of cities are doing on the river clean. Even Guwahati, and I'll tell you, पहले गुवाहाटी में कोई बात ही नहीं करता था. ब्रह्मपुत्रा था, ब्रह्मपुत्रा के किनारे की स्थिति, और सडनली अब गुवाहाटी हैज स्टार्टेड लुकिंग एट हाउ डू दे रियली rejuvenate their river front. And using a local technology, using a local method, not concretizing it, but doing it. So each city has started doing small initiatives across their USP, which they think is a pride to their city. And I think that movement which has generated is really to celebrate and also document and showcase outside.
So do you think कि all Indian cities will be climate resilient, and with all these initiatives that we are talking about, do you feel वो time आएगा जहाँ पर हमारा उत्तराखंड, असम और ऐसे areas भी climate resilient हैं, और जो वहाँ लोग रह रहे हैं, for example असम में हर साल flood आता है, and I have somehow for a reason having a connection witnessed what people go through there. So even for what happened in Uttarakhand, so how do we build these areas as climate resilient? आपको लगता है कि ये होगा, successfully होगा?
I think the winds of change has started blowing in India. Question is, how do we accelerate these winds? It's not a question that we can change the wind. Winds have already seen. Cities have started moving towards it. They require a lot of handholding, technical support, handholding. And I think that is where the institute of like mine comes into a picture, because they don't need a knowledge. cities have enough knowledge. What is the missing link is we always focus on what should be done. We also focus on why it should be done. We also focus on where it should be done. But nobody is focusing on who is the person who is going to put a pen to the paper. And that is where I particularly in the climate language has to be language for that person who is he has to understand. So how do you skill him? Because, these are the new areas where
Yes,
nobody knew.
agreed.
So you need a new skilling techniques.
Yes.
You need a new education tools, and you also have to look at a pedagogy. You can't just give a book to him and say that ये आज से ऐसे करना है ऐसे करना है. वो नहीं होगा. You need to work with him, understand him, make him understand, and this climate has to be a value proposition for city.
Yes.
Unless it becomes a value proposition of cities will not. So you have to make it why it is valuable to them. So I think these are the things, and so challenge for institute like mine is like हमको वो टूल्स बनाने पड़ेंगे जो वो समझ सके. ज्ञान देने की जगह वो जैसे कंप्यूटर की रेवोल्यूशन इंडिया में आया, डिजिटल रेवोल्यूशन आया. जब आपने कंप्यूटर दिए थे तो ये कहते थे डब्बे रख दिए हैं हमारे घरों में, पर उनको जब वो कीबोर्ड में उन्होंने खेलना सीखा तो वो कीबोर्ड नॉलेज कीबोर्ड्स हमें बनाने पड़ेंगे. जब तक हम वो नॉलेज कीबोर्ड्स नहीं बनाएंगे लोग नहीं समझेंगे उनको वो वैल्यू. तो हमें टेम्पलेट्स बना के देने पड़ेंगे और ट्रेनिंग कैपेसिटी बिल्डिंग बना के देनी पड़ेगी. नॉलेज प्रोडक्ट और बेस्ट प्रैक्टिसेस देनी पड़ेगी. और बेस्ट प्रैक्टिसेस भी हम ये कहते हैं कि यू कैन मेक मुंबई या शंघाई. दैट कैन नॉट हैपन बिकॉज मुंबई हैज टू बी मुंबई. In that context has to be. You can't have a just European model come and set in it. We have to contextualize. And that is what we need to really talk about, that journey in their language, their ways of doing it, and thinking that these are the people who have to really work it. And back end, I think is also, क्योंकि अब ये नई issues आ रहे हैं. जैसे जब मैं प्लानर था तो हमें क्लाइमेट चेंज कभी सब्जेक्ट नहीं होता था. अगर होता भी था तो वो बहुत हाई लेवल का क्लाइमेट चेंज, सिटी लेवल का ग्रैनुअल लेवल का क्लाइमेट की बात ही कोई नहीं करता था. तो हमें अपने करिकुलम्स को चेंज करना पड़ेगा, न्यू प्लानर्स बनाने पड़ेंगे उस ढंग से. और प्लानिंग एजुकेशन सिस्टम में इन चीज़ों को लाना पड़ेगा सो कि नई लीडरशिप जब आए तो वो उन चीज़ों को समझे.
आई थिंक राइट. एंड मैंने कहीं पढ़ा भी था कि अर्बन प्लानिंग हम अब जैसे करते हैं ना, इट्स गोइंग टू डिफाइन द फ्यूचर ऑफ आवर सिटीज.
या
And also sir, जैसे मतलब for example I saw some really old pictures of London. Like मतलब आज लंदन दिखता है कि बहुत साफ है, air quality and everything is just top notch. But एक time पे वो नहीं था. Even the situation was really bad than what Delhi is right now. So what are your thoughts on Delhi, particularly when it is listed as one of the most polluted cities in the world? So what does a roadmap for Delhi to you looks like, and where is say Delhi lacking today?
See, I'm because you asked the Delhi. My institute is also involved in developing a master plan of Delhi 2041.
Wow.
So I'm talking about Delhi not today, not tomorrow, 20 years down the line. And again, the challenge for us during working on a master plan, we took 4 years of it. How do you bring?
So 4 years to
develop a master plan of Delhi, which is now under process of approval. And 2021 will come to an end, and 2041 master plan will take. Again, the challenge with us was: do we want to make a static master plan, or we want to have a strategic master plan? So for us, when we are not actually in full terms of planning agency, we took this master plan of Delhi because our challenge was, by doing a master plan of Delhi, if we can bring these new elements and new thinking in the master plan, we can establish principles of planning in the country. And all other emerging metros or big cities can really use those principles of master plan. I see a great future for Delhi. I'm not saying that it is possible to have Delhi as you describe London, and it has a small elements of it, definitely. I think the challenges for us, and that's where I come, is of governance challenges, of planning challenges, and siloed convergence challenges. How do we break those type of challenges is the challenge in itself. Where Delhi is, like while I was preparing a master plan of Delhi and think, we have to coordinate around 70 agencies. getting a data, right data to make a evidence-based planning, what we call it, is where how do you, so we need to invest in quite a lot of data building exercises. We also need to look at, while we have an outcome-based approach, what we want 2041 Delhi to be, we also have to have a granular approach of how do we look at zoom in and zoom out. That's where I think the planning has to be in four broad areas, and that's where my lesson is while we are looking at master plans of any city, it has to be look at a scale. And when I say scale, I don't want, I say scale in the sense it has to look at a neighborhood level, and also simultaneously look at a larger of a regional level. Because a lot of these climate issues which you talked about cannot be addressed within the city's jurisdiction. They go beyond the city's jurisdiction. So it should be like a Google map. When you are going to a neighborhood shop, you zoom in, but when you are going outskirts to look at the economy, you can zoom out. And that is where we need to, our master plans, when I say static to strategic, has to be that flexibility of master plan that we can look at from the neighborhood level to a scale level. Second thing which we have to also realize, and that's is a form of a planning. When I say form of a planning, my only idea is that you have to look at it. Every city has its own culture, its own USP, its own thing. So somebody is a growing city. Somebody is like a New York you talked about, is more of a matured city.
Matured city, yeah.
China is developing more of a connected cities. Then you have a transforming cities like,
Right.
in Jakarta and all, which are really gearing up for those things. Then you have Indian cities who are growing and have aspiring cities or hungry cities. You have to really look at it and see how you really bring that culture, USP, its thing to really plan that. That's it. And fifth is 20 years of master planning. Nobody knows what happens. So we have to break our master planning for 3 years, 5 years, and then monitoring frameworks has to be really built, that we have to have a midterm course correction. If it is not working, come back. And we should not feel shame that things did not work. So that's why I'm saying, while we are looking at master plan of Delhi and 2041, we have brought a lot of these elements which you talked. We talked about green-blue infrastructure there. We did talk about inclusive planning over there. We did emphasize on disabled-friendly Delhi. We did, so all the things which we have, or green spaces in Delhi with under the green, or water bodies improvement. So all the elements have been put in. The question which Delhi is more of a governance is, how do we implement it? End of the day, it is implementation. And second is financing. So unfortunately, and that's another thing, we really need to look at it. How do you link our master plan with more of a city viability investment plans? Those we have not been able. We don't make CIPs. So that is where challenge we have. So we have to now get into city investment plans, link in the budgets, and then prioritize our actions. But if we go back to our governance, I think, I particularly, when I go back to my home and I tell my son that your father is making planning a better Delhi for you, I do see a mistrust in his eyes. I'm not denying that fact. But I also see a hope in when I say my son, I'm listening to the youth of the city. I also see that they also feel that there is someone who is really thinking about us. Only question which I always say that for a planners like us or institutions like us, the challenge is how to keep that hope alive and make that possibility. So that smaller low-hanging results we have to start giving to the people rather than just giving it a master plan as theoretical exercise.
And I 100% agree with it, what you just said. I also feel that, as you said, governance and financing are really two important places. So what do you feel that, how is, say, urban governance, like, or how should urban governance be reinvented for us to do this? Because this cannot be implemented in like silos. I always believe that, yes, there are parties like, two major parties are playing in India. We have to collaborate. we cannot be wasting our time and, just putting out questions, just blaming each other. The idea is how we support each other, because goal सबका एक है. ठीक है, I understand power play and everything, but एक goal के लिए can everyone come together? Because अगर city ही नहीं बचेगी तो आप काम किस पे करोगे?
No, I fully agree, and I think that's the one we definitely need to invest quite a bit on, because while we have been working on, and we have a very top-down approaches which we have. How do you decentralization and other things? 74th Constitution Amendment was the first time when we really looked at third tier of governance was established, but it was like Aishman Bhava, like Bhisham Pitama was given. You live, but the question is, it had to be these local bodies has to be equipped with the finances, function and functionaries, all three of them. And unless we look at all three of them, it will not work. So when you talked about governance. For me, the governance structure has to be 5 things which has to be done. And if we call it an engine of growth, so first of all, the structure has to be established. क्योंकि वो इंजन किस चीज़ का है? वो इंजन कार का है, वो इंजन ट्रक का है, वो इंजन हवाई जहाज का है, वो इंजन प्लेन का है. जब तक उस इंजन को हम डिफाइन करते हैं और उस इंजन को डिफाइन करने के साथ उसका स्ट्रक्चर करेंगे, किस जगह पे ये इंजन फिट हो रहा है, ताकि वी कैन टेक अ मैक्सिमम यूटिलाइजेशन ऑफ दैट इंजन, कि ये हमें 800 सीसी का है, 1200 सीसी का है, उसका उस हिसाब से हमें उसको स्ट्रक्चर्स को इक्विप करना पड़ेगा. सेकेंड थिंग विच यू ऑल्सो टॉक्ड अबाउट इज फ्यूल. उस इंजन को करने के लिए फ्यूल चाहिए. फ्यूल मीन्स फाइनेंसेस चाहिए. सो वी हैव टू मेक श्योर that finances are available with this engine, with the cities to really. And during COVID we did see कि cities के पास एकदम इतना challenge आया, तो उनके पास वो flexibility नहीं थी कि करने. बहुत सारी cities ने, and if you look at after effects अब शायद पता होंगे, क्योंकि उस time उन्होंने to gear up and to manage, they manage somehow, but there is no sustainable sources of we have a central finance commission, we have a state grants, we have a thing, but there is no continuous flow of fund or a kitty which that has to be. So that has to be really thought of. What are those funds which are there, which look at not only the schemes and projects, but outside the city, within the city's jurisdiction. Third thing which we have to look at is regulatory frameworks also. So uske wo जो इंजन है वो चलेगा तो उसके क्या रूल्स, रेगुलेशंस, पॉलिसीज क्या हैं, वो हैज़ टू बी एस्टेब्लिश्ड. मिनिमम एसओपीज हैज़ टू बी प्रिपेयर्ड. सो दैट हैज़ टू बी रियली वर्क आउट. फोर्थ इज ड्राइवर्स. जो वो ड्राइवर उसको चलाएंगे एज मैन पावर, ह्यूमन कैपिटल. हाउ डू यू इक्विप द ह्यूमन कैपिटल विद द राइट नॉलेज, राइट टूल्स, राइट thing, and how do you skill them up for really addressing that thing? And last, which again you says, nobody has answers. We when we talk about this, I was reading somewhere where somebody has quoted, and I'll just think, while we are talking about climate issues, all of us, and I'm not talking when we say India, but across the globe, all of us, like Arjuna, who is on the Mahabharata, कुरुक्षेत्र के महाभारत के मैदान में है, और वो कृष्ण से पूछ रहा है कि मैं गांडीव उठाऊं या नहीं उठाऊं, क्योंकि मरने वाले मारने वाले. So he's in a confused state of mind. What should be there? And we all are in that confused state of mind. We need to, and the only way this confusion has to be removed is to put our integration of minds together, and work out the solutions which may be very local, very granular, and then start syncing it. Because none of us have a right solutions. We all have to look at, and I'll use again the word called sandbox of innovations. We need to experiment. We need to experiment, then fail, and then re-experiment. But action has to be done. So if these are the 5 elements which we need to really think, that is the only governance frameworks which we can bring together. Otherwise, ये चैलेंज जो cities level पे आ रहे हैं, cities will not be able to manage. And you said that जब सिटी ही नहीं रहेगी तो करेंगे क्या, तो वो करने के लिए हमें अब टाइम आ गया कि हम ये करें. एंड फॉर्चुनेटली एंड आई सेड G20 जब ये हो रहा है, इंडिया इज अ प्रेसिडेंसी, मेरा इंस्टीट्यूट इज अ टेक्निकल सेक्रेटरेट फॉर अर्बन 20. एंड अर्बन 20 की अगर ये टेक्निकल सेक्रेटरेट हम हैं, तो इट बिकम्स नॉट ओनली एज अ सेलिब्रेटिंग दैट वी आर अ अर्बन 20 एंगेजमेंट ग्रुप एज माई इंस्टीट्यूट. I think it also is a responsibility to leave this legacy of India's empowering urban local bodies, which India can then start taking up and bringing this urban discourse, which is actually India has started doing it, but I think it's concretizing it, stabilizing it, strengthening it. Only infrastructure development will not be. I think it has to be elements of sustainability and element of inclusivity has to be woven into it. And that is how we need to go.
Definitely. And sir, एक चीज़ और बताओ, जैसे आपने ये सारे एलिमेंट्स बताया, डेफिनेटली अग्री विद एवरीथिंग दैट इज सेड, बट क्या जैसे आपने बोला हमें एक्शन लेने की ज़रूरत है हर लेवल पे, तो जो आपने मास्टर प्लान बनाया, डू यू गाइज ऑल्सो इन्वॉल्व से एंटरप्रेन्योर्स स्पेसिफिकली, एक्शन टेकर्स? बिकॉज व्हाई आई एम सेइंग दिस टुडे इज लाइक, फॉर एग्जांपल आई हैव लाइक अ फ्रेंड, उसने एक स्कूल में, मेहरौली के एक स्कूल में इंस्टॉल्ड हिज डिवाइस फॉर क्लीनर एयर, and the kind of results he got was amazing. Similarly, Rakesh Khatriji, the nest man of India, who is bringing birds back. There are people who are cleaning up ponds, and many other things is done at different parts of Delhi. So आपको ऐसा लगता है कि if we just say support these state specific entrepreneurs, and if not just state specific, मतलब उनकी technologies हम बाकी states से भी accelerate करें, maybe our cities could go on this journey really faster. Because when I'm speaking to you, I know so many people who are working on brilliant technologies. For example, the way Akash has done with Zip Electric, deliveries are electrified, the way Blue Smart is coming into Delhi, and many other these players. So do you feel कि अगर हम इन सारे players को integrate करके एक platform पे लेके आएं, and we ask them कि आप क्या काम कर रहे हैं, and we just support them also, then also our cities can become really resilient. We just need to support these people because ये लोग तो already, और ये लोग skilling भी कर रहे हैं. For example, I was surprised when I saw कि जैसे आकाश ने बताया कि उनका एक driver है, वो इतने कमाता है और वो किस तरह वो e-scooter चला रहा है. Similarly, I had someone on the podcast from ChargeUp, and what ChargeUp does is it's for the e-rickshaw battery swapping. So the way they have built the entire ecosystem, the way they have trained their rickshaw drivers. So do you feel कि ये हमारे लिए एक बहुत अच्छा valuable लोग हैं जो हमें help कर सकते हैं?
100%, but this has to be very, very city driven, and it has to be city specific.
Yes.
It cannot be scaled up at a national level.
But
and
city
also.
specific.
But city specific, 100%. NIUA in that, again, when I say NIUA, my institute, we have started something called Climate Practitioners India Network. Idea was, ये practitioners जो city में काम करते हैं, cities को इन ideas की ज़रूरत है, और practitioners को cities की ज़रूरत है to showcase how as my institute become an honest broker to bring this together. So we started in a similar way, but I think this work need to be scaled up because within the city there are a lot of people who can contribute to the cities. Question is, how do you bring them together? How do you bring them in one platform where they can start exchanging their ideas and putting it? And see, ideas are okay, but also they need to be executed. They need to be scaled up. What support city can provide, and that has to be more of a between the city and these practitioners. Unless we start that dialogue, that trust building will not come. So I think that is a big idea is to start a trust building, then matchmaking, and then delivering this. And I fully agree. Unless we create at a city level these type of platforms, will not happen. But thinking that it will be a larger scale and then granular, it may not happen. We at again Delhi, I'll give you an example. Delhi में water is the biggest challenge. तो as an NIU हमने एक दिल्ली वाटर फोरम कर दिया. तो उसमें हमने कहा कि जितनी भी एजेंसीज हैं, जितने भी पार्टनर्स हैं, वो इस वाटर फोरम के साथ जुड़े. वो कहाँ पे वाटर के ऊपर काम कर रहे हैं, एजेंसीज कहाँ पे वाटर पे काम कर रही हैं, वो सबको हम एक टेबल पे ला रहे हैं. So at least Delhi specific water issues can be done. So we have also looked at it. Some of the, as you said, some of them have said हम तो already काम कर रहे हैं इस low income settlements में. वो क्या काम कर रहे हैं उसको डॉक्यूमेंट करें, तो बाकी लोग उसको अलग सेटलमेंट्स में करेंगे. बट every city, as I am a national institute, I think to drive this, every city need to have an anchor like urban institute which drives this, brings them together. Right now, only one National Institute of Urban Affairs will not be able to drive it. Every city need to have a city urban, because if it is a 50% of the challenge, I think we need to have a state
Yes.
urban institute. We need to have a city, and that is where I always believe the capacity in silos will not work. Capacity grid, अगर power grid हो सकती है, तो capacity grid क्यों नहीं हो सकती? With a very systematic and thing, and that need to be really worked out
I
in
agree
India.
with you because I feel जब हर state specific होगा तो those people would have more in-depth knowledge of what's happening in that city, how things are working, and even we are engaging community. And we have always seen जब हम community को engage करते हैं तो results हमेशा अच्छे आते हैं. So I feel that's a great way. Also, sir, the last two things I want to know from you. A, please अपना project धारा explain करो, because when I read about it, I really liked it and I would like the audience to know about it. So please tell what's धारा.
Okay. धारा जो मेन इशू है धारा का वो ये है, और मैं हमेशा कहता हूँ कि हमने धारा से शुरू किया था, अब हम दरिया की तरफ बढ़ रहे हैं, क्योंकि वो ग्रो हो गया है. हमने 30 सिटीज़ को के साथ काम किया. उसमें मेजर इशू ये हमारा ये था कि सिटीज़ जो हमारे ट्रेडिशनल सिटीज़ नदियों के किनारे बनी हुई हैं, हाँ, उनका नाम, उनकी एग्जिस्टेंस, उनकी यूएसपी उस नदी के कारण है. वो नदी उसको उस सिटी को डिफाइन करती है, पर ओवर अ पीरियड ऑफ टाइम हम नदी भूल गए. नदी का इकोसिस्टम और सिटी का इकोसिस्टम आपस में बात नहीं करते. जब हम बात करते हैं, नदी इरिगेशन डिपार्टमेंट करता है, वो नदी को और सिटी जो है वो अर्बन, दोनों के बीच में कोई वो नहीं है. सो ये था कैसे सबसे पहले हम सिटीज़ को नदी को सिटी के फैब्रिक के साथ मेन स्ट्रीम करें, जो हम प्लानिंग प्रोसेस में हम भूल चुके हैं, तो कैसे हम उसको लाएं. दूसरा था कि अगर एक सिटी कुछ अच्छा नदी के किनारे काम कर रही है, इंस्टेड ऑफ डुप्लीकेटिंग दैट अदर सिटीज़ कैन, तो हमने एक रिवर सिटी अलायंस बनाया. उस रिवर सिटी अलायंस का नाम हमने धारा दिया. तो शुरू हमने नमामि गंगा मिशन जो हो रहा था, गंगा की सिटीज़ के साथ किया और 30 सिटीज़ के साथ किया. आज हम 102 सिटीज़ के साथ काम कर रहे हैं और 104. लेह भी हमारे साथ जुड़ गया है. कल मंडे को हम ब्रह्मपुत्रा के साथ जुड़ रहे हैं. दे हैव now it has become a more of a movement that cities want to learn from each other, and that's what you are saying, a platform where they can dialogue. अगर औरंगाबाद की छोटी सिटी कर सकती है, मेन स्ट्रीम कर सकती है, तो दूसरी क्यों नहीं कर सकती. If you allow me, I was again listening to one story yesterday, and I think your question really aligns with that. कि एक some of the motivational speaker was yesterday telling a story कि एक आदमी ने दुकान खोली और उसने कहा कि यहाँ पे ताज़ा फल यहाँ पे मिलते हैं, और कोई आया, उसने कहा यहाँ क्यों लिखा है, यहाँ हटा दो क्योंकि हम तो यहीं आ रहे हैं. दूसरा आया, उसने कहा ताज़ा क्यों लिखते हैं, तो उसने ताज़ा तो आपके यहाँ बासी फल लेने तो नहीं आएंगे, तो ताज़ा. इस ढंग से कोई आते गए और वो साफ हो गया. एंड लास्ट पर्सन केम और उसने कहा कि ये स्लेट खाली क्यों नहीं है, इतनी सुंदर स्लेट है आपकी, इस पर कुछ लिखते क्यों नहीं. वही इंडिया का हिसाब हुआ है. इंडिया ने अपने प्लानिंग लॉस, अपनी प्लानिंग थिंकिंग, अपने कॉन्टेक्स्ट को ब्रिटिशर्स ने कहा, वो चेंज कर दिया. यूरोपियन मॉडल आए, यूरोपियन में चेंज कर दिया. इस सारे प्रक्रिया में हम अपना जो इंडिया का लोकल कॉन्टेक्चुअल प्लानिंग सिस्टम्स था उसको भूल गए. अब द टाइम हैज़ कम एंड रिवर सिटी अलायंस is a journey to bring India's context back, कि इंडिया में सिटीज़ ऐसे होती थी. क्योंकि मैं जिस टाउन से आता हूँ, एक बहुत छोटे टाउन, मंडी शहर है, ऑन द वे टू हिमाचल प्रदेश, वहाँ से आता हूँ. जब मैं आजकल जब आप मिक्स यूज लैंड यूज प्लानिंग ये सब बात करते हैं, तो मैं जब उस पुराने शहर को देखता हूँ तो उसमें कहता था लोकल नेबरहुड था जिसमें गाड़ियाँ नहीं आती थी. वो एक छोटा सा पब्लिक स्पेस था जहाँ लोग इंटरेक्ट कर सकते थे, छोटी छोटी दुकानें थी. देन मेजर मूवमेंट जो ट्रांसपोर्ट की होती थी वो बाहर होती थी, तो पीपल हैज टू, इनर कोर्ट वाज अ वॉकिंग एंड थ्रू पेडेस्ट्रियन, वेयर एज आउटर वाज मूवमेंट. वी हैड दोस सिस्टम्स, बट ओवर अ पीरियड टाइम ने उसको बिल्ट इन्वायरमेंट के जो ब्रिटिश उस ढंग से बना दिया कि वी आर लूजिंग द ओरिजिनल फैब्रिक. एंड आई थिंक द होल आइडिया ऑफ रिवर सिटी अलायंस वाज create that demand for looking at a planning context. एट सेम टाइम वाइल वी आर डूइंग अ डिमांड साइड एज अ धारा, हमने कहा रिवर सिटी अलायंस है, वैसे हमने क्लाइमेट अलायंस भी बनाई है जिसमें ऑल द पार्टनर्स, मल्टीनेशनल, बायोलैटरल्स जो क्लाइमेट पे काम कर रहे हैं उनको इकट्ठा किया। आइडिया इज अगेन कि ये सप्लाई है, ये डिमांड है, कैन हम इन दोनों को जोड़ के एक ऑनेस्ट ब्रोकर बन सकें, और जो जिसको नहीं तो सारी की सारी अगर आप देखें डोनर ड्रिवन भी, एंड आई वाज अ पार्ट ऑफ अ डोनर, सारे के सारे अगर डोनर्स भी हैं वो कहाँ काम करते हैं, वो चेन्नई काम करेंगे, वो पूना में काम करेंगे, वो इंदौर में काम करेंगे, सूरत के, बट जो हमारी सेकंड टीयर थर्ड टीयर है वहाँ। सो आइडिया इज हाउ दिस पॉट ऑफ resources can be utilized in a larger context is what we are trying to do it. So that is where we are as an NIUA is taking a dhara, is basically mainstreaming rivers into the thing, hand holding cities। और ये नहीं कि हमने सिर्फ उनको किया, हमने 5 cities में लेके हम खुद वो river centric plan बना रहे हैं। हमने उसको प्रोजेक्ट लेवल पे भी दिया, हमने उसको पॉलिसी भी की। तो URDFPI गाइडलाइंस, स्पेशल गाइडलाइंस को पॉलिसी लेवल पे इनेबलिंग फ्रेमवर्क्स किए, प्रोजेक्ट लेवल पे हैंड होल्डिंग का किया, एंड कैपेसिटी बिल्डिंग के साथ हमने किया। एंड लास्टली व्हाट वी आर डूइंग, वी आर इन्फ्लुएंसिंग द स्टूडेंट्स टू डू अ थीसिस सो दैट academia and the practice can start learning। और हमने एक बहुत सुंदर प्रोग्राम किया है SARS, Smart Cities Association with Academia and Research, because if you again I'll say कानपुर से अगर आप IIT को हटा दें तो IIT को पता भी नहीं चलेगा कि मैं कानपुर में थी। So how do you bring IIT's expertise to कानपुर, or Kanpur's USP for the students to do a improve on it? So that type of a relationship we are trying to develop under the SAR program, and idea is to really create an urban ecosystem in place rather than just a project kar liya, but bring all the elements of ecosystem in one place, so that cities start learning from them and learning from each other। Because अंग्रेजी पढ़ाने से कुछ नहीं होगा, वो आपस में जितना जल्दी सीख जाएंगी, आपस में इंटरेक्ट करके सीख जाएंगी। I think that has a much more domino effect than what we are। We can only create conditions to see the create impacts, and that is the role of institution like me, is creating those conditions।
डेफिनेटली, व्हाट आई रियली लाइक्ड अबाउट दिस, आपने कहा ना कि जो उनकी ओरिजिनलिटी है उसको स्ट्रेंथन करना, फॉर एग्जांपल इंडिया इज आई थिंक अ हब ऑफ नेचर बेस्ड सॉल्यूशंस, but I think over the time now it is again coming up, for example mangroves and everything. There's so many intrinsic nature based solutions every state has. Also sir, my last question to you, that we talk about cities, how do you like, what are your thoughts on urban poverty? For example we always say कि जो मतलब हीट स्ट्रोक्स हैं या एक्सट्रीम वेदर है, इसमें यही लोग सबसे ज़्यादा वल्नरेबल होते हैं, क्योंकि जहाँ ही रहते हैं स्लम्स में, वहाँ पर दे आर ससेप्टेबल टू एवरीथिंग, फ्लडिंग हो गया, हीट हो गया। Similarly, when these people say come to cities, the pressure on cities already increase. Like, of course, it gives them the economic opportunity, but a lot of times it because कि उनके गाँव में because of say water shortage या फिर because of weather farms नहीं हैं या फिर agriculture खराब हो गया है. So what do you think is the solution to it? Like, how should we handle urban poverty when we are moving towards building climate resilient cities?
No, I think this is a great question, and how do you bring, and actually it is how do you bring mainstreaming inclusiveness into the, while the cities are growing. See, one of the, again, biggest fundamental challenge which we have while we are now moving towards this, how do you create hierarchy of cities in India? इंडिया में अभी तक हायरार्की ऑफ सिटीज़ नहीं है। इंडिया में जब सिटीज़ जिस ढंग से डेवलप हुई हैं ओवर अ पीरियड ऑफ टाइम, वी हैव इंडस्ट्रियलाइजेशन, सो इंडस्ट्री सिटीज़ डेवलप हुई और उसके आसपास वो सिटीज़ डेवलप होती है। तो अब आप दिल्ली देखें, दिल्ली के बाद जो नेक्स्ट सिटी है वो आपको चंडीगढ़ ही एक्चुअली मिलती है, बीच में करनाल और वो अभी डेवलप हो रहा है। द क्वेश्चन इज हाउ डू यू स्ट्रेंथन दिस सेकेंड टीयर, थर्ड टीयर ऑफ cities and create that network of cities. So everything does not come down to Delhi. So you have to create this job opportunities in the smaller towns, medium towns, longer towns. That type of a network of cities, unless we create. And I think government of India has, through this Pradhan Mantri Gati Shakti program, or
Like
this
one district, one
one
program.
program,
Yeah.
aspirational program has started creating. But that need to be woven so that people, migration, the pressure on the bigger cities become a less, and you have a more economic opportunities down in second tier and third tier of cities. And that is why I always say that जो हमारा and the climate action, which again coming back, जो हमारी cities हो चुकी अब वो like बॉम्बे, पुणे, चेन्नई, ये अब एक उस पे होगी. But now the challenge is, now the policies and thinking has to move down to second, कि जो अभी बन रही हैं उनको कैसे हम अच्छे से ठीक मैनेज कर पाएँ, उनमें कैसे वो प्लानिंग प्रोसेसेस, बिकॉज प्लानिंग इज एंड द मेजर. समवेयर वी हैव neither the planners on the cities, and somewhere the planning profession itself has lost that steam. Planning has been taken over by engineers and management gurus, and planning is not really as lucrative as we used to think. So skilling people in a right thing, bringing them to the planning, so that the young people start seeing career in the planning profession itself, and alleviating the planning profession is another big issue which we need to really bring, so that we can have more and more planners at the second tier and third tier of city, and then manage them better, so that these issues which are cannot be happen just one day, but can always be slowly brought into the goals which we have envisaged for our 2030 or 2050. We can take it out what we say Amrit Kal se tak hum agar that pride we can take. And I think, but definitely that journey has moved. Again, my first thing that it need to be accelerated, and people like you who has to start talking about these stories. I definitely see, and I always believe, we are also too harsh on ourselves. Let Indian cities, the complexity and the challenges which Indian cities have, you cannot compare them with the European and other cities because of population, because of other issues. But among those challenges, we are still most resilient cities, and we have been able to. So question is also start celebrating our successes, how little they are. We are very bad in documenting and celebrating. We are too harsh on ourselves, but celebrating, but also while that is from the our side, but also I think if we really want to mainstream this climate issues, this inclusivity issues, or a green or nature-based solutions you are talking about, we already have those. The question is de-jargonizing them,
Yes.
so that we move towards the decarbonizing the country as a whole. But I always very honestly feel that Indian ABC has changed, and we need to create our own ABC now to really make that more impact on the ground.
I 100% agree. And like coming towards the end, what I really feel is that काम होना start हो गया. Sir, when I talked, suppose you told me 10 new things कि ये सब हो रहा है. Similarly, in Delhi, for example, I know that when now, the one who collects the dustbin, जो मतलब कूड़ा जो घर से लेते हैं, वो जब आते हैं ना, अब वो unsegregated कूड़ा नहीं लेते हैं. They have made it a norm कि इस दिन मुझे ये चाहिए and इस दिन मुझे ये चाहिए. And I have seen, like in my neighborhood, the way things have evolved. And similarly, other areas also, like a lot of things are happening. I think it's just a matter of time that everything starts making sense, because now I feel we understand the ecosystem approach. For example, you told कि आपने कैसे climate करा. Similarly, there was someone from Central Road Research Institute on the podcast. They told that how they are building this transportation infrastructure keeping climate in mind. So I believe that yes, it's going to happen, and also opening up opportunities for youth, for people, and lot many things. So sir, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing all the insights, and thank you for telling us that what a true climate resilient city means. And we'll try to de-jargonize all these bigger jargons, because सब कुछ बहुत simple है, इतना complex नहीं है.
Yeah. No, I think thank you very much for having me here, and I'll summarize my the podcast in 3 lines, and that's a message which I. The only thing is, and I call it a formula, which is E3 is equal to I3, which is engage, empower, and evolve, which you also said, and we are already in that journey of evolvement, will lead to innovate, implement, and what I call it, more of a ideate, actually ideate, implement, and innovate and implement. ये तीनों एक साथ हम करेंगे तो ये अपने आप that journey will unfold, and we will be, I think the whole journey which we are saying, transformational urban India or new urban India, will definitely emerge.
Definitely. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for being here.